Because it preferred to stay in the dark, the family didn't realize what a threat it was, and its presence in the home was mostly ignored. In fact, everyone in the family understood that it was not to be talked about. After all, it just made everyone uncomfortable. Can you imagine how insane that would be? It's dangerous, it's deadly, it's loose in the house, and no one says anything. No one does anything. Everyone pretends like everything is okay. But everything is not okay.
Well, it's kind of heating up outside, isn't it? I mean, I hear this week it's supposed to be 90 degrees on Tuesday. Is that what you heard? How many of you welcome that? You like that heat finally? Yeah. We had a long winter. Yeah. So no complaining, in a couple weeks when we're all sweating and your air conditioner breaks or something. But it's kind of heating up, and it's been heating up in here a little bit too, hasn't it? And if you've been with us for the last a couple weeks before today, you know that we're in a series about sex and sexual intimacy and sexual temptation and sexual sin. And I know this is tough for some of you to sit through this, but I don't know why, because sex has been on your mind since you were young, and you've heard what the culture says about it. Culture has a lot to say about sex. In fact, it will tell you the exact opposite of what God tells you. And if you're an adult and you're like, oh, gosh, I don't know why he's talking about that, trust me, you want me to talk to you about this. You want me to talk to your kids about this, don't you? I mean, do you know young people whose lives have been affected or ruined by this topic? Sure you do. And, some of you men who have daughters, do you want these young men out there who are pursuing your daughters to know what's right and wrong in this area? I think you do. And some of you who have sons, do you want to get a phone call from somebody else's dad saying, hey, my daughter tells me that she's pregnant and it was your son? Or worse yet, end up in jail somewhere because of, something he thought was okay and was right. My point is, for so long, generation after generation, nobody talked about this stuff with their kids. Nobody did. I have to say that I didn't get a sex talk from my parents. I didn't. I don't know if they weren't comfortable doing it, or if they were afraid to do it, or if they just assumed, oh, he'll pick it up. And guess what? Guess what? When you don't talk to your kids about this, guess what happens? They pick it up, don't they? Sure they do. They learn it. They'll learn it from somebody. I told you last week, if you were here, that one of my first real, understandings of some things that I shouldn't have really been approaching at that age was when I went to spend a night with a friend, a bunch of us from school, and there were some things done and shown and laughed about that I knew were wrong, but I was so curious about it. It was so interesting that we were all part of it. So this is the most thought about topic in the world today. You believe me on that? And ladies, I've told you this before, if you knew how often your husband thinks about sex, it would amaze you that he gets anything done in his life. You know what I mean? It would. And you might be sitting there thinking, no, not my husband. Well, if you're married to a man, a real man, trust me, he does. And I don't care how old he is, he thinks about this. And ladies, we wish you'd think about it some more. Somebody texted me the other night. I don't know. Somebody texted me the other night and said, look, did you make a mistake on that 72-hour deal? I told you the 72-hour deal. And if you weren't here, now, by the way, we're going to talk about some things today. If you have small children in here, you may want to take them to Kids Zone. But I told you, men need a sexual release about every 72 hours. These are men. And one guy texted me and said, can you tell my wife you made a mistake? Tell her it was 24 hours or 48 hours. So I texted her, and I said, this is a mass text. And I just want you to know I made a mistake. And I read my notes wrong. This wasn't 72 hours. It was 72 minutes to 24 hours. And she said, me and a whole bunch of women are coming to your house to beat you down. Now listen. Now that's an average. That's statistics. That's people who study this kind of thing, and you deal with that in your marriage. But here's what I want you to do. Next week we're going to close out this series. And if you have questions, you can send those questions to me, and I will keep everything confidential. But if you have questions about anything related to this topic in your marriage, as a single person, divorced person, I've gotten questions from divorced people. I've been there and now I'm not there. What now? Do I have to continue to abstain? And I said, yes, you do. You should have stayed married. That you should have made that work. That's what your commitment was, but you didn't. Now you need to save yourself until you're married again. So I'm getting lots of questions already. But if you want to send me questions, then you can do that. I've got my. I got to get this. That's my email right there. Just any of our staff or elders you can reach. First name at gatewaychurch.net. You can find me on Facebook. Make sure I've got a blue shirt on. And that's my phone number. So send those to me if you want to. We're going to talk about, kind of wrap things up and talk about forgiveness and grace and how to recover from sexual mistakes and that kind of thing, and how to go on with your life. All right? Now, this kind of a visual illustration here. This is, it's a hot summer night, and there's nothing like a cold glass of water, is there? I mean, on a hot day, you're working out in the garden, or if you're cutting grass, or if you've been running, or working out and you're sweating, or maybe you're inside, and I don't know many things that are more refreshing than a nice cold glass of ice water. Now, some of you like iced tea or you like other things, but ice water is good for you, or water is good for you. I think some people say ice is maybe not as good, but water, especially if it's nice and cold, is good for you. And so, in a way, last week I talked about the fire pit, and the sex is like this fire pit. As long as it's inside the fire pit, it's good, it's safe. If it gets outside the fire pit, it's destructive and can be dangerous. And that's the marriage, the fire pit. Well, today I want to compare this to a nice cold glass of water, and I want to tell you something. God's gift to us in marriage is a nice, cold, refreshing glass of water. And if you can kind of imagine, that's what sexual intimacy is in your marriage. It is like a man coming home from a hard day's work, or a woman, a school teacher or nurse or whatever she does, works in an office or something, and she's stressed out. She comes home and this nice, just a cold glass of water. All right, that's what it is. Now, we've been in this series where we're talking about a little bit about King David. Remember the first message? King David messed up. When kings went to war, he stood on his balcony. He saw this woman. He lusted after her, and he tried to keep that a secret. He had her brought in. He knew she was somebody else's wife. She got pregnant. He had to deal with that. All the while, he's keeping this a secret. He had her husband killed, on and on and on, and he paid the price for that. And so we talked about lust. And we talked about sexual temptation and how we struggle with that, especially us men. It's our battle. Listen, guys, you're not battling this by yourself. There are no men who don't battle this unless there's something wrong with them or they had something done to them. Every man battles this, so you're not alone. It is our battle. And ladies, I say we battle with it more because God put this on our brain. And I think you battle with it too in different ways. But pornography and trashy romance novels and some fantasy depiction of somebody else's husband or somebody else's wife is not the answer. It's not the answer. The answer, the Apostle Paul said, it's better to marry than to burn with passion. That's what's best. So if you want to have sex, get married. That's what God says. And I realize that many of you grew up like I did. You didn't hear this in your home. It wasn't talked about. It was taboo. Nobody talked about this. Nobody had any expectations. Nobody told you what to do, what not to do. Or maybe you grew up where you never heard this in church. I was talking to one guy this week who doesn't go to this church, and another guy was there, and who goes to our church, and he said, "Tell him what you're preaching on Sunday." And I told him, and he said, "What? You're preaching about that in church? Who does that?" I said, "Well, it should be done in every church." And so I know there's some of you who, maybe over 40, 45 years old who are thinking this is not a topic for church, but I'm telling you folks, it's in the Bible from front to back. We have got to talk about this. Just because our culture... Here's what happened. A long time ago, these men who had vowed themselves not to have sex ever, but many of them were doing it secretly, who became leaders of the church, the Catholic Church, many of them who they passed on sex and marriage, and they said, "We don't want it, and we don't want you to have it." And they gave it up. And the world said, "We'll take it. We'll take it. Let us have it." So the world took it, and the church gave it up. And no wonder a lot of churches today don't talk about this subject, and a lot of young church kids get pregnant out of wedlock. We have them here in this church. A lot of young boys are having sex before they get married, before they graduate high school. Some of them are in middle school. And they never hear this stuff in church. And I want to tell you, our student minister here, he knows what's going on. And Steve Harley, he was a student minister here. And they have lots of questions. And they want to know, how far can I go? They want to know, what can I do? They want to know, what can I not do? How far is too far? And they're asking all the wrong questions. And maybe their youth minister will talk to them about it. Ours will, I know, but in churches. And we've just blown it on this topic. We have blown it on this topic in the church. So we have all these young people now who don't know what to expect, and their parents won't talk to them about it, and they're not hearing about it in church, and so we're just blowing it. They're blowing it, and we're just kind of covering it up and saying, well, gosh, they messed up. We'll get on with things. Now, thank God when we blow it, there's grace. His amazing grace that says, I still love you. Let's pick it up where we are, and let's get it right. Let's do this right this time. And we're going to talk about that next week a lot. Well, last week we talked about Amnon, David's son, who lusted after his half-sister and raped her. Remember that story? It's in the Bible. He raped her, and then, Absalom, her full brother, said, "Don't worry about it. Just don't embarrass him." So Absalom, by the way, ended up killing Amnon for that. He held that in his heart. So today we're going to look at another son of David's. We're going to look at Solomon. Now, you've heard of Solomon. He's the wisest man who ever lived. And he wrote at least two books that we know of. He wrote some of the Psalms, by the way, and he wrote all the Proverbs. I believe he wrote some of the Psalms, and not many of them. David wrote most of them, but he wrote all the Proverbs. And he wrote these two books, one Ecclesiastes and one the Song of Solomon. It's also known as the Song of Songs. Now, if you're familiar with Ecclesiastes, you know that this is a kind of an interesting book. It's really weird. We take phrases out of Ecclesiastes like, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you what? You die. That's in Ecclesiastes. There's a lot of great gems of truth in Ecclesiastes. But if you really read Ecclesiastes, you know that here's what happened in Ecclesiastes. You got a guy, Solomon, who has all the wealth, all the wisdom, all the power. that any man could ever want to have, because God gave him wisdom and he attained all that other stuff. He had access to anything and everything. And here's what he said. And really, the Ecclesiastes is an experiment in having everything. You know, it is an experiment of having everything you want. That's what Ecclesiastes is. And here's what he said. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 9 and 10, he said, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me, and all this my wisdom stayed with me. That's kind of an interesting thought, but it's almost like, okay, I'm going to try this out, and God's going to continue to give me this wisdom, and I'm going to just kind of see the result of this life that I'm living. So he was able to understand that this is right and this is wrong, even though I'm doing the wrong. He says, listen to this, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. Now Solomon, he had, the 300 wives and 700 concubines, and their entire mission in life was to please him sexually. That was their job. That was their mission. He had more than 2 for every day of the year. He had 3 for every day of the year almost. And that he said, I refused my eyes no pleasure. This is what psychologists call the hedonistic paradox. A hedon is someone who just goes after every lust and pleasure and worldly thing they want, and they don't stop with anything, and they don't care what anybody says. They have no moral boundaries. They have no guardrails. They have nothing to stop them. If they want it, if they see it, if they like it, they have it. This is the hedonistic paradox, because at the end of this book, Solomon says, I refused myself nothing, and he says, in the end, I realized that it was all meaningless. Everything is meaningless. In other words, nothing satisfied me. And so in the Song of Solomon, he's looking back now, and I think he's looking back on an earlier day, an earlier time, perhaps when he was first married, maybe a one man and one woman marriage to this young Shulamite maiden, this young Shulamite girl. And he's looking back, and he's discovering or remembering what this was about, what this relationship, what this love was about. And what really satisfies is not having anything and everybody you want in life. What really satisfies is when you commit yourself to one woman, men, or ladies to one man, and you work on that. That's what really satisfies. That's what brings you fulfillment in life. And I tell you, as you get older and as I get older, that's what we realize, is that this is what makes me happy. We've been through a lot. We've had a lot of arguments, or we've been through a lot of trials or a lot of suffering, but I want to tell you, honey, we're here today. We're in the rocking chairs, and this is what I'm proud of. This is what satisfies me. Now, I have to tell you about the Song of Solomon, also known as the Song of Songs. I don't know how it made it in the Bible, but it made it in the Bible far before these stuffy, celibate Catholic priests got a hold of it. It was already in there, so they couldn't get rid of it by now. The Hebrew scholars put it in the Bible, but the Hebrew scholars would not let any young Hebrew boy 13 or under, he couldn't read it. If you're 13 and under and you're a Hebrew boy, you couldn't read it because of some of the things we're going to read today. They knew what it meant. They knew everything. And to them, it was God loving Israel. It was God's love for his people. That was what Solomon was really on a higher level. That's what he was talking about. But when the Catholic Church got a hold of it from about the 3rd century on, they really denied anybody the opportunity to read this book. They didn't want you reading it. Of course, most people couldn't read until, later. There weren't any Bibles in the hands of the people until the 15th century. So there's a lot of history of concern over this book. There are even scholars today who will say this book has nothing to do with sex. It has nothing to do with the church, with Christ's bride. I don't know how they can say that. It has everything to do with something else, but it doesn't have to do with a marriage, sex within marriage. It doesn't have anything to do with that. But I disagree with them, and I think God put it in there for those of us who are married to understand that this is good. This is what God designed for us. So I want to tell you at the beginning, there's a lot of concern about this book. Over the centuries, it has been, pushed aside. The Catholic Church has really, because again, you got celibate, stuffy men who don't want sex, and they give it to the world. So what we're going to read today is in the Bible. And you should turn to your Bible if you want to, or you can read mine. But this is in the Bible, and you probably have never heard a sermon on the Song of Solomon. I'm not sure I've ever preached one. But here we go today. I'm going to dive right into it, right off. And one lady told me this week at small group connection, she said, this topic is hard for me as a woman who grew up in a home where this wasn't talked about. And if it was talked about, it was no, no, no. Don't, no, 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 no. And she says, it's hard for me now to be a wife to a man who wants me to say yes, yes, yes. She said, it's tough. And she says, I have to think about things a little bit differently. So we're talking about marriage, and we're talking about sexual intimacy. And one of the words for sex in the Hebrew is the word dode. And it means a mingling of the souls. And I know in our Western mind, when we think of sex, we think of a physical act. But for the Hebrew mind, in the Eastern mind, it was more than that. It was a physical act, but it was emotional, it was spiritual. It was a coming together, a bonding of husband and wife in a spiritual and an emotional and a mental and a physical relationship. So when you think of sex, that's what you should think of. And this Western thing that we've portrayed it to be because of being the TV and pornography and things like that it's just a sexual act and there's no emotion, there's no spirit, there's nothing involved, is wrong. Our culture's been wrong on this. And it takes all three to make God's plan work. So we're going to jump into chapter 4. And I want to tell you, we're in the Marriott hotel room here, and we get a glimpse of Solomon and his bride. And he says, how beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. And so he's talking to his bride, and maybe Solomon's, laying on the bed. Now, okay, this is PG-13, all right? This is adults only here today. We've got a married man who's in the hotel room, and he's on the bed. He's waiting for his bride to come out to him, and she comes out of the bathroom or whatever, and he says, how beautiful you are, my darling. How beautiful you are. He says, your eyes behind your veil are doves. That kind of tells us where he's looking, doesn't it? He's looking at her eyes. He doesn't see his wife as just a piece of meat on a platter for his pleasure. I have to admit, as a man, this is a struggle for all of us, I think, as men. But Jennifer used to, say things like, "Hey, don't look at me as just a piece of meat." And I would say, "Hey," I try to talk my way out of it. Great, man, grade A premium cut, baby. That doesn't work, though, does it? You can't do that. But listen, he's looking at her eyes. He's looking at her eyes. And he says, your hair, and I think he was stumbling here a little bit, okay? I think he's searching for something, what? He said, your hair is like a flock of goats. Now, obviously, in Hebrew thinking, and back in the day, this would have been a beautiful thing. But, guys, I don't think you shouldn't copy this verbatim for your pickup lines or with your wife, for your initiation thing. But, maybe something else, but he was really telling her, your hair is beautiful. And I can see him, maybe he let her hair down and it fell over her shoulders. Hebrew women would have their hair up in public. And then he says in verse 2, he says, your teeth are as white as sheep, just shorn, coming up from the washing. In other words, you have beautiful teeth. He goes on and he says, each has its twin. Not one of them is alone. In other words, you got all your teeth. Now, that may work for you guys, depending on where she's from, what county she lives in, And if that offends you, well, maybe that's where you live. But hey, there's nothing like a woman with all her teeth, white, shiny teeth. And he says, your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with courses of stone on it. Hang 1,000 shields, and all of them shields of warriors. You see what David's doing? He's focusing on her face, her her eyes, her mouth, her lips, her neck. He's really zeroed in on her. He's not looking anywhere else. He's talking to her. And then, well, he moves down a little bit and he says, your breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. He says, until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. You see what he's doing? He's working his way down. And he says, you are altogether beautiful, my darling. There's no flaw in you. I want to say a couple things about these verses here when it comes to having great sex in your marriage. I don't have to tell you when I say how to have great sex, I'm not talking about single people. I'm talking about married people, all right? I don't need to say that every time. Here's how to have great sex. First of all, men, be verbal. Be verbal. There's so many women who say, I wish my husband would talk more. I wish he would tell me more. I wish he would let me know this or know that. And guys, it's hard for us, isn't it? Because we like to sit back and expect her to read our minds and expect her to know what we want and when we want it. And we kind of like just expect her to be some psychic that she can listen. There's nothing wrong with working on this and being like Solomon here and just telling your wife, honey, you look hot today, or you look good tonight, or whatever it is. I just love the way your hair, guys, I want to tell you something. Women respond to verbal communication. And you can get by with a whole bunch of stuff. You can mess up royally, but if you say, oh, honey, you're losing weight, your hair looks great, and she'll forget everything, Use this to your advantage, guys. Communication is a key to a great marriage. And ladies, be visible. Remember, we've said this throughout the whole series. Men are stimulated by visual. Visual stimulation is what they see. So you don't come in the bedroom, especially if it's been 72 hours, with an old nightgown and zit cream and your hair up and say, I guess you want to do something tonight. You don't do that. Talking to wives here, be visible. Let him enjoy you. And I want to tell you something, ladies. I know a lot of you struggle with how you look, or, and you know why? Because we are so, again, bombarded by images and magazines, and those people in those magazines don't look like those people in those magazines. There's airbrushing and all kinds of things going on, and you're bombarded with this, and you think you have to look this way or look that way, and you think, oh, he doesn't want to see me, keep the lights off. But I want to tell you, when your husband's laying there, I want to tell you something. You are beautiful to him, and you don't have to worry about that. You need to be visible. Men are stimulated by this, you can work on that. And then the third thing I want to say, take it slow. Solomon was working it, baby. He was working it. So this is building anticipation. He's building anticipation. There are a lot of guys who really this is a 2-minute deal or something. Listen, we need to do what Mark Gungor says, slow roast your woman. You start in the morning and say, hey, honey, what are you doing tonight? And now, listen, I don't want to come across like I got this down, all right? I'm so glad my wife's not here tonight. She would be like, or today, right. So I've asked her to go to Taze Valley this morning. No, she'll be here. But you know what I'm saying? We do. We need to work on upping the average, fellas. And make this a whole day deal. And ladies, you can do it too. Tease your husband. Build anticipation. There's a lot of kissing going on in the next verse. He says in verse 12 and 13, your lips drop sweetness as the honeycomb, my bride. Milk and honey are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. And so, he's building anticipation. And he's making this woman feel like she is the most beautiful woman in the world. And she is to him. Now, I want to tell you, folks, verse 13 is is the verse I need to put the glasses on for, because this is the verse that most scholars believe refers to oral sex. Now, again, when you hear that word, I know you're like, your spine just bent over backwards or something and doubled up, but I want to tell you, it's in the Bible. Most scholars and the Hebrew scholars all knew this. That's why they wouldn't let their little boys read it. But verse 13, and there are other verses, chapter 2, verse 6. We already read one, I believe the mountain of myrrh, where he was working his way down. And this one says, you are a garden locked up. You are a spring enclosed, a sealed fountain. Your plants, and he would be referring to her legs, your thighs. Some versions translate this thighs, are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits. In verse 16, he says, awake, north wind. This is another reference that most scholars believe to oral sex. I never thought I'd be able to say that easily. South wind, blow on my garden that its fragrance may spread everywhere. Let my beloved come into his garden and into its choice fruits. Now listen, why are we talking about this in church? Well, number one, it's in the Bible, and this is a love relationship within a marriage. And as far as I'm concerned, what happens in a marriage in your bedroom between two loving, God-fearing, consenting adults, I think when it comes to sex, I think that's up to you and God. And so there may be some of you who this is disgusting to you. There may be some of you that you're like, yeah, I'm glad finally somebody's talking about this. But I want to tell you, this is a clear reference, this and other verses, to oral sex. Now, what do we say about that? Why does this matter? Because I want to tell you, here's what young people are asking student ministers. They're saying, does this count? Does this count? And student ministers have to say, does this count or not? And you know what? I think, yes, it counts. It counts. Now, in the Song of Solomon, typically when you read the word garden, it's referring to the women's private parts. And when you read the word fruit, it refers to the men. So you can read it for yourself. And it counts. I think it can be one of the most intimate expressions of love in your marriage. Now, again, I'm not saying go do this. I'm not saying that you're wrong if you don't. What I'm saying is this is okay. This is God's gift to you. And you can disagree with me if you want to, but you're going to have to explain these verses away. And the volumes of scholars who know this is what they're referring to, especially the Hebrew scholars down through the ages. And this is a very unselfish act. And so that's the fourth thing I want to say is when it comes to having great sex, focus on your spouse. Since when did it become all about us? And I think as men, we struggle with this. It's like, she's satisfying my needs. It's about me. It's my needs. It's my needs. It's me, me, me. And that's the way to have your expectations let down. That's the way to have your joy taken away from you. What I'm saying is, if you focus on, and that's biblical, isn't it? Philippians 2. Think of others more than you think of yourselves. Then you're going to have a much better marriage and a lot more satisfaction. That's in the New Testament. Listen to 1 Corinthians 7. This is the Message version. You can read it in any version you want, but the Apostle Paul said the marriage bed must be a place of mutuality. In other words, we're both agreeing here what's going on. Guys, did you hear that? We're both agreeing. If your wife says, no, I don't want to do that, then she's not agreeing. All right? If your husband says, no, I don't want to do that, then you're not agreeing. And so you need to talk to him more, or you need to talk to her more. He says the husband seeking to satisfy his wife, the wife seeking to satisfy her husband. Marriage is not a place to stand up for your rights. Marriage is a place to serve the other, whether in bed or out. So focus on the other person. And fifthly, be expressive. Be expressive. I think we have to do this. We are sexual people, and we have to express that to each other. And we have to help one another understand this is who we are, and this is and ladies, you know your husband better than anybody. You can read his cues. You know when he's when the 72 hours is up. You know when he's satisfied. And listen to this verse. This is I think this is after everything has happened. I think they're still awake, laying in bed, and I think Solomon is saying, I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk. You know what he's saying there? He's saying, you ever said that? You ever heard anybody say that? This satisfies. And this is the only time God speaks in the Song of Solomon, this next verse. The only time. God says, eat, friends, and drink. Drink your fill of love. You see, here's the last thing I want to say about this. If you're married, you need to enjoy God's gift. There's so many, especially women, who grow up in a home where this is no, taboo. And they come to a marriage and they struggle with enjoying this part of their life. But I want to tell you, this is what your husband thinks about. Honestly, ladies, I don't know if this is destroying anything in your belief in marriage, but this is one reason your husband married you. So that he could have this intimate relationship with you. So enjoy. Have fun. There was a couple walking in the church here as I was coming in, and I said, to the man, why don't you teach this lesson this morning? He said, no, I'm not an expert. I said, I think you're an expert. You and your wife seem to be happy all the time. You keep her happy, she's keeping you happy. Now, I'm not going to point them out this morning, but there are a lot of you who really know how to enjoy this, and that's what we should be doing. So, listen, somebody gives an illustration. Let's say this is your wife sitting here, and husband comes home from work, and he says, hey, honey, can I have a drink of water? She says, no, not right now, I'm busy. He says, okay. All right. And so it comes back an hour later, and he says, hey, honey, can I have a drink of water? She says, no, I got a headache. Try again tomorrow. So you say okay, and you turn to your side of the bed and gnaw the bedpost all night or something. And so the next day you're like, hey, honey, oh, I'm so thirsty. Can I have a drink of water? And she says, do we have to do that now? You need a drink right now? Well, yeah, I was thinking. She said, well, can you just wait a little while longer? So he's getting really frustrated now, and he says, can I have a drink of water? And she says, well, you're not going to get any if you act like that. And so it's been 4 days now, and finally he's begging, and he says, can I have a drink of water? And she says, all right, but hurry up, make it fast. I got stuff to do. And you know what's happening there, ladies? We put a lot of this on the backs of men. Here's what's happening in your relationship when that happens. Listen, let me tell you something. This area of your husband's life is one of the most important areas of his life. I don't know if you knew that. This area, his sexual life, his relationship with you, is one of the most important areas of his life. And you know what that's doing? It's telling him he's not in charge. You're in charge. That's what it's telling him. You're the boss here. And so you want him to be the leader of your family, and you want him to make spiritual decisions, and you want him to stand out front and lead your children. But he's not the boss here. He knows that. The most important area of his life, you might think, well, his kid should be, listen, this is the most important, one of the most important areas of his life. And he's not the boss. You're using this as leverage against him. And you're the boss. And he has to beg and whimper to get a drink of water. And so many men are getting water somewhere else because they're just not getting the water at home. And so if you want him to be the leader of your home, you want him to be the boss, you need to work with him. You need to work with him, because that's what we're doing here. This might not be as important to you as it is to him, but it is important to him. And you have to work with him on this and let him be the boss. Encourage him. Tell him how to do it better. Tell him, where the best water is and how to get it faster. And that's what you have to do if you want him to be the leader of your home. You cannot emasculate him in this area. If you do, he won't come to church because he doesn't feel blessed. His marriage isn't. He won't enjoy his life. You will drift apart. There will be a wedge between you. Before you know it, you'll both be searching for water in other places. So this is God's plan for us. And this is what I think we should do. And when we fight, you can go on, I'm going to finish now, but when we fight, you can read chapter 5 of Song of Solomon. And, that's a great interchange there. I don't have time to finish this, but it's a great interchange where she says no, and he comes in, and then he runs, and then she becomes the pursuer. But listen, here's my point today. Sexual intimacy is God's gift to us inside our marriage. If it's anywhere else, it can be destructive and it can be damaging. But inside the marriage, it can knock your socks off. That's what I want my daughters to know. I want my daughters to know that. And if you'll wait for that, it'll be the most incredible thing in your marriage that'll go for a lifetime. All right? Everybody okay? Anybody need sunglasses? Stand up. I want to pray for you. Couples, we're going to sing our closing song. You can stick around the next service if you want to hear this again or listen to it online, but let me pray for you now. Lord, thank you so much for this wonderful gift you've given to us. And God, you chose me to talk about this service, this topic, and I thank you for that. Although it's not been easy, Lord, talking to people who struggle with hearing this, but God, we thank you for the gift. We thank you for your word, and I pray, Lord, that you would bless us now. Bless every marriage with this good thing. Bless every single person, Lord, with the anticipation of what could be and will be perhaps in their day when they get married. And I pray for their purity, and I pray for their self-control in the meantime. Lord, you're so good. I thank you for my family, for my wife of 25 years come Tuesday. And I thank you, God, for all you've given to us. And if there's anyone here, Lord, who's never experienced what you have for them in their life, in their heart, I pray they'd claim it today. In Jesus' name, amen. If you have a decision to make today, want to come talk to me, then come on up front here.